You know, sometimes in this wild world of connections, we forget the quiet power of boundaries. We chase love, attention, validation, and in the process, we can lose a little piece of ourselves. But here's the truth. People don't respect what you give away too easily. They respect what you protect. Boundaries aren't walls, they're signals, energy markers that say, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what I won't accept. And when you live by them, something amazing happens. Men, good men, start to see you differently. They don't just like you, they respect you, they value you. So let's talk about 5 powerful boundaries that quietly command respect, not through force, but through presence. You know, there's something quietly extraordinary about self-respect. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand attention, it doesn't need to prove anything. It just is. It moves through the world like still water, steady, deep, unshakable. And when a person carries it, you can feel it. The air around them changes. People notice even if they don't understand why. Self-respect is the foundation of how the world treats you. It's the energy that tells others, this is how I expect to be spoken to. This is how I expect to be treated. And the truth is, you don't even have to say those words out loud. People pick it up in your tone, in your choices, in the way you walk away when something doesn't sit right with your soul. I've met so many people who mistake self-respect for ego, but they're not the same thing. Ego says, I'm better than you. Self-respect says, I'm enough, even if you don't see it. There's no arrogance in that. It's quiet dignity. It's knowing your worth without needing the world to validate it. And here's the thing. When you respect yourself, you create a kind of gravitational pull. You draw in people who see that light in you, who match it, who add to it. But when you abandon your self-respect for someone else's approval, it's like breaking your own heart slowly, piece by piece. You start to give discounts on your value. You start to say yes when your heart is screaming no. And eventually you wake up wondering how you got so small trying to make someone else comfortable. Respecting yourself means making peace with being misunderstood sometimes. It means people might call you cold when you're just being clear. It means walking away from things that once felt like home because you've realized they were only holding you hostage. It's not easy. It never is. But every time you choose yourself, you build a little more strength in your spirit. You remind yourself that your worth isn't negotiable. I remember a friend once telling me a story about a woman he used to date. She had this calm confidence about her. She never raised her voice, never chased him when he pulled away. When she said no, it wasn't loud, it was final. One day, he canceled their plans last minute. She didn't yell, she didn't argue. She just said, that's okay, I'll use the time for something else, and she meant it. And something about that hit him harder than any argument ever could. He realized he wasn't dealing with someone desperate to be chosen. He was dealing with someone who already chose herself. That's the kind of quiet power that self-respect gives you. See, when you truly respect yourself, you stop negotiating your value in spaces that can't see it. You stop explaining why you deserve basic decency. You start protecting your peace like it's oxygen, because it is. You understand that your energy, your kindness, your attention, they're sacred. Not everyone deserves access to them, and that doesn't make you selfish. It makes you wise. Sometimes self-respect looks like walking away without closure. Sometimes it looks like blocking a number or not replying to a message that reopens a wound you worked hard to heal. Sometimes it looks like forgiving yourself for staying too long and promising never to abandon yourself again. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's real. And you know what's beautiful? When you live with self-respect, people feel it. You don't have to demand loyalty or affection. The right people just give it. They rise to the level of how you treat yourself. They see how you handle your time, your words, your boundaries, and they mirror that. It's like you teach people how to treat you simply by the way you treat yourself. Let me tell you something. The world tests your self-respect all the time. It'll send you people who say they love you but don't honor you, jobs that pay you but don't value you, situations that look good but cost you your peace. And every time life is asking one question, what are you willing to tolerate? Because whatever you tolerate becomes the standard. You can't force someone to see your worth, but you can refuse to let them define it. You can walk away from anything that asks you to shrink. You can say, no, I deserve better, and mean it, not because you think you're perfect, but because you know you're enough. And when you live like that, people start to see the difference between what's common and what's rare. Self-respect also means you keep promises to yourself. You don't just talk about boundaries, you live by them. If you tell yourself you'll never settle for less than honesty, you don't make exceptions for charm. If you say you'll prioritize your health, you don't let convenience talk you out of discipline. Every small act of self-honor builds trust with yourself. And when you trust yourself, the whole world feels different. Here's a truth that's hard to learn. Self-respect sometimes looks lonely. There will be nights when you sit with your decision to walk away, and it hurts. You'll question if you made the right call. You'll miss the familiar. But in that silence, something powerful is happening. You're meeting yourself again. You're remembering who you were before the world told you to be smaller, softer, quieter. And that reunion, that moment when you realize you no longer betray yourself for love, that's where true peace begins. The most magnetic people aren't the loudest or the flashiest. They're the ones who know who they are and don't compromise it. They don't chase attention because they're not starving for it. They've already filled themselves up with self-worth. When you reach that point, respect follows naturally. People value what they have to earn, and the energy of self-respect isn't handed out freely. It's built, protected, and preserved. So how do you start? You start by getting honest. You ask yourself, where am I settling? Where am I pretending not to see red flags? Where am I giving second chances to situations that don't deserve first ones? And then, you choose differently, not out of anger, but out of alignment, because self-respect isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that peace is a form of power. In the end, self-respect is about love, not the kind you chase, but the kind you become. It's the quiet confidence that whispers, I know who I am, I know what I deserve, and I'm no longer afraid to act like it. And when you carry that kind of energy, the world notices. The right people show up, the wrong ones fade out, and life starts to mirror the way you treat yourself. That's the silent, unstoppable magic of self-respect. It doesn't just change how people see you, it changes how you see the world. Emotional responsibility is one of those things we don't talk about enough. Everyone wants to be understood, to be seen, to be loved the right way, but very few people want to take responsibility for what they bring into a relationship, for the energy they carry, for how they handle emotions when things get hard. It's easy to blame, to point the finger, to say, you made me feel this way, but the truth is, nobody can make you feel anything that isn't already sitting somewhere inside you. What they do might touch that wound, but the reaction, that's yours. And learning to own that, to really take responsibility for your emotions, that's where peace begins. Emotional responsibility is not about shutting down or pretending you don't care. It's about knowing where you end and someone else begins. It's the awareness that says, your emotions are yours and mine are mine. I can care about how you feel, but I can't carry it for you. And that awareness changes everything. It makes love cleaner, calmer, more honest, because instead of trying to fix or control each other, you start to meet each other as two whole people. You've probably met someone who constantly tries to manage the emotions of everyone around them, always smoothing things over, apologizing even when they did nothing wrong, walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. It looks like kindness, but it's actually fear. Fear of conflict, fear of rejection, fear of not being loved if they don't make everyone else happy. That's what happens when you take responsibility for feelings that aren't yours. You lose yourself trying to hold together things that aren't meant to be held that way. Taking emotional responsibility means saying, I can love you deeply, but I will not betray myself to do it. It's the understanding that you are allowed to express your truth, calmly, clearly, without guilt. You can say, I'm hurt, without turning it into, you made me this way. You can say, I need space, without turning it into punishment. And you can say, I disagree, without turning it into a war. That's maturity, that's emotional discipline. There's a story I once heard about a woman who used to take every argument personally. If someone was upset, she felt it was her job to fix it, to smooth it out, to make everyone okay. But over time, she realized she was carrying everyone's emotional baggage but her own. One day, her partner got angry about something small, late plans, a miscommunication. Instead of rushing to apologize for something she didn't do, she paused and said, "I can see you're upset. I'm here to talk when you're ready, but I'm not going to take this personally." And then she let it go. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was freeing. She learned that being calm didn't mean she didn't care. It meant she cared about both of them, him and herself. That's the beauty of emotional responsibility. It's not about control. It's about clarity. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop absorbing other people's storms and start learning how to stand in your own sunlight. It doesn't mean you don't feel deeply. It means you know how to navigate what you feel without drowning in it. Think about it. Every time you react out of anger, you hand your power to someone else. Every time you let someone else's mood decide yours, you surrender control over your inner world. Emotional responsibility is taking that power back. It's saying, I get to choose how I respond. I get to decide what energy I live in. And once you understand that, the whole world feels lighter. It also means not weaponizing emotions, not using silence as punishment, not saying things just to hurt. It means knowing that your feelings are valid, but they don't justify every action. You can be angry without being cruel. You can be sad without being manipulative. You can be disappointed without trying to make someone else pay for it. That's what makes you emotionally strong. Not how loud you express your feelings, but how consciously you manage them. And it goes both ways. You also stop taking responsibility for emotions that belong to others. If someone is jealous, insecure, or distant, you don't twist yourself into shapes trying to fix them. You don't over-explain your worth. You let them feel what they feel. You can show empathy, but you don't absorb it. Because once you start taking on someone else's emotional world, you lose control of your own. I think one of the hardest lessons in life is realizing that love doesn't mean rescuing someone from themselves. You can walk beside someone in their pain, but you can't carry them out of it. They have to do that part. Emotional responsibility is understanding the difference between support and sacrifice. You can support someone without sacrificing your peace. You can be there for someone without being their emotional crutch. When you start living this way, you stop chasing harmony at the expense of honesty. You stop saying it's fine when it's not. You stop holding resentment in silence because you're afraid to make waves. Instead, you learn to speak your truth with kindness. You say, this is how I feel, this is what I need, this is what I can give. And when someone else tells you the same, you listen. Without trying to fix, defend, or justify, you just listen. That's what creates real connection. Research has shown that emotionally intelligent relationships, the ones built on accountability and communication, last longer and feel safer. Because when both people take responsibility for their own emotions, there's no blame game, there's no scorekeeping, just two people doing their best to understand each other, while also respecting their own boundaries. It's not perfect, it's real. And look, being emotionally responsible doesn't mean being emotionless. It doesn't mean suppressing how you feel. It means creating enough space between your feeling and your reaction to choose how you want to show up. It's that pause, that moment before you speak, before you text, before you walk away, where wisdom lives. In that moment, you decide whether you're going to repeat an old pattern or write a new one. Most people never get there because reacting feels easier. It's easier to lash out, easier to blame, easier to run. But the truth is, reacting is just pain's way of trying to feel powerful again. Real strength is softer. It's patient. It's saying, I feel this anger, but I don't have to become it. That's emotional mastery. And when you live that way, you become a safe space for yourself first and then for others. People trust you more. They feel calmer around you because you're not projecting chaos. You don't take things personally, and you don't make everything about you. You listen, you understand, you hold space. That's rare. And rare things get respected. It takes practice. It takes humility. You'll fail at it sometimes. You'll catch yourself reacting and regret it later. But every time you notice, every time you pause, every time you take ownership, you grow a little stronger. You stop being a prisoner of your emotions and start becoming their guide. And here's the quiet truth. Emotional responsibility sets you free. It frees you from the weight of needing everyone else to act a certain way for you to be okay. It frees you from resentment, from guilt, from emotional chaos. It frees you to live with peace, Not the kind that depends on others, but the kind that comes from knowing you're in control of your own inner world. When you reach that place, something beautiful happens. You start loving differently. You love without fear. You listen without ego. You speak without anger. You stop needing someone to complete you because you already feel whole. That's the kind of energy that doesn't just attract love, it sustains it. Because the moment you take responsibility for your emotions, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You take the wheel, and suddenly peace isn't something you chase anymore. It's something you create right here within yourself. Sometimes chemistry feels like a wildfire. It's electric. It burns through reason, through caution, through everything that used to make sense. You meet someone and suddenly the world feels sharper. Colors feel deeper. Music sounds different. It's intoxicating. It's connection in its rawest form. But it's also dangerous when it blinds you to the truth. Because not everything that feels powerful is good for you. Not everyone who makes your heart race is meant to hold it. There's this illusion that chemistry equals compatibility, that if it's passionate, it must be right. But that's not always true. Sometimes chemistry is just the body remembering a familiar pattern. Even if that pattern is pain, sometimes it's trauma calling out to trauma, hoping this time the story will end differently, but it never does. Not until you raise your standards. Standards are what anchor you when chemistry tries to sweep you away. They're the voice that whispers, I know what I deserve and I won't let a spark make me forget. Because here's the truth. Chemistry can be fleeting, but character endures. Attraction fades when respect is missing. Passion loses its heat when consistency disappears. You can't build peace on chaos and call it love. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who made you feel alive, but deep down something felt off? Maybe they were charming, magnetic, knew exactly what to say, but somewhere inside your intuition was whispering, this isn't safe. And you ignored it because the connection felt too strong to walk away from. That's what happens when chemistry overpowers standards. You start mistaking intensity for intimacy. The truth is, you can have butterflies with someone who's bad for you and boredom with someone who's good for you. That's why you need both heart and clarity. Standards are what keep you grounded when emotions try to take the wheel. They remind you that peace is a form of passion too, the kind that doesn't burn out but stays steady and warm. I remember a story about a woman who kept falling for the same kind of man, exciting, unpredictable, emotionally unavailable. She told herself every time that this one was different because the connection felt stronger, the spark brighter, but after each heartbreak, she started noticing a pattern. The common thread wasn't the men, it was her ignoring her standards in the name of chemistry. One day she decided to make a promise to herself. She would only choose someone whose actions matched their words. That became her standard. And at first it felt strange. The quiet kind of love she later found didn't come with the highs and lows she was used to, but it gave her peace. It gave her safety. And for the first time she realized that peace was never boring. It was healing. That's what standards do. They protect your future from your impulses. They make sure you don't confuse excitement with alignment. Chemistry might make you feel wanted, but standards make you feel valued. And when someone values you, they don't make you guess. They show up, they listen, they keep their word, they make you feel safe, not small. A lot of people think having high standards means being demanding or difficult, but it's not about perfection. It's about self-respect. It's about saying, I've worked too hard to know myself, to heal myself, to love myself. I won't trade that peace for chaos just because it feels good for a moment. Standards aren't about keeping people out, they're about letting the right ones in. There's science behind this too. Studies from Harvard and Stanford show that emotional stability and mutual respect predict long-term relationship satisfaction far more than physical attraction. Chemistry gets you noticed, but character keeps you loved. Because attraction might open the door, but integrity builds the home. Sometimes people will test your standards, not because they mean harm, but because they don't have any of their own. They might try to convince you to bend your boundaries, to move faster than you want, to overlook things that feel wrong. But every time you give in to that, you teach them that your boundaries are negotiable. And once someone learns that your peace is for sale, they'll keep bargaining for it. Having standards means you're willing to walk away when something doesn't align, even if it hurts. That's the hardest part, because walking away from chemistry feels like walking away from magic. But what you're really doing is walking back toward yourself. You're saying, I choose what's right over what's easy. I choose respect over rush. I choose clarity over confusion. That choice doesn't make you cold. It makes you conscious. It's okay to want connection. It's okay to want passion, but don't let it cost you your self-respect. The right connection will never ask you to lower your standards to keep it. It'll meet you there. It'll honor the boundaries you've built. It'll feel calm in the places where chaos used to live. I think people forget that real chemistry isn't just in touch or attraction. It's in trust. It's when you can talk for hours without pretending. It's when silence feels comfortable, not tense. It's when you can disagree without fear of losing the connection. That's the kind of chemistry that grows stronger over time because it's built on truth. There's this quiet power in knowing what you want and refusing to settle for less, not out of pride, but out of peace. Because when you settle, you teach your heart to survive, not to thrive. You teach it that love has to hurt to be real. But love isn't supposed to be a battlefield. It's supposed to be a partnership. Two people choosing each other with respect again and again. If someone makes you feel like you're asking for too much, it's probably because they're offering too little. The right person won't make you feel guilty for having standards. They'll appreciate them. They'll see that you're not looking for perfection. You're looking for effort, consistency, and authenticity. And they'll rise to meet that, not run from it. The truth is, standards filter out confusion. They turn attraction into alignment. They make sure you don't waste time trying to build a home in someone who only came to visit. Because the energy you invest in love should never come at the cost of your self-worth. You have to remember, peace doesn't mean the absence of passion. It means the presence of safety. It's when your heart can rest in someone's hands without fear of breaking. It's when love feels like breathing, not surviving. That's what happens when you choose standards over chemistry. You stop chasing intensity and start creating intimacy. And sometimes it'll feel quiet at first. You'll meet someone who's steady, kind, consistent, and your old self might whisper, "Where's the spark?" But give it time. Sparks fade. Stability glows. When you've healed, peace starts to feel like passion. You realize the fire doesn't have to burn to keep you warm. In the end, chemistry draws you in, but standards keep you whole. They remind you that love isn't just about how someone makes you feel. It's about how they make you be. Do they bring out your calm, your joy, your sense of safety, or do they make you question yourself? You'll know the answer by the peace or the tension you feel in your chest when you're around them. So, when it comes down to it, choose the kind of connection that honors your standards, not just your emotions. Because the people who truly value you will never make you choose between being loved and being respected. They'll make you feel both, every day in small, steady ways that last far longer than the rush of chemistry ever could. Space and independence. They're not about distance and they're not about separation. They're about breathing, about remembering that love doesn't mean losing yourself in someone else. It's easy to fall into that pattern, to blur the lines between you and us, to start revolving your world around another person until you can't tell where your rhythm ends and theirs begins. But real connection doesn't ask you to disappear. It asks you to exist fully. It asks you to bring your whole self, not a smaller version of it, into the relationship. There's something magnetic about people who have their own world, their own passions, their own quiet rituals, their own time. You can feel it in the way they walk, in the calm that surrounds them. They don't cling, they don't beg for attention. They simply are. And that being draws others in, because space, when it's held with confidence, isn't a threat, it's an invitation. Independence is often misunderstood. People think it means coldness or emotional walls, but it's not that. Independence is the deep knowing that you are whole on your own, that you can share your life with someone without needing them to fill your emptiness, that you can love deeply while still keeping a room in your soul that belongs only to you. That room, that sacred inner space. It's where you return to remember who you are, especially when the noise of the world gets too loud. We live in a culture that romanticizes obsession. Movies, songs, stories, they tell us that love means you complete me. But when you really think about it, that's not love. That's dependency dressed up as devotion. Because when you depend on someone else to complete you, you're always one heartbeat away from losing yourself. Real love says, I was whole before you came, you just make my life richer. There's a quiet strength in being able to stand alone and still choose to share your life. That's not loneliness, that's power. It's knowing that your happiness doesn't depend on another person's mood, or their attention, or their approval. It's knowing that you can be content in your own company, that solitude isn't emptiness, it's grounding. I once met a woman who told me she used to lose herself in every relationship. She'd stop painting, stop seeing friends, stop doing the things that made her feel alive. Her world would shrink down to the size of the person she was dating, and every time it ended, she felt like she had to rebuild from nothing. One day, after yet another heartbreak, she made a promise to herself. Never again. She started hiking alone, reading again, spending time in silence. At first it felt strange, like she didn't know what to do with all that space. But slowly, it became home. The next time she met someone, she didn't hand over her whole life, she shared it, and that made all the difference. That's what space does. It gives love room to breathe. It allows connection to grow instead of suffocate. It's like a fire. If you smother, it dies. But if you give it air, it burns brighter. Space isn't absence, it's oxygen. In every healthy relationship, there are two distinct energies, togetherness and individuality. When they're balanced, it's beautiful. You laugh together, build together, dream together, but you also have moments where you go off on your own, where you pursue your own growth, your own joy. That balance keeps love alive, because when you lose your independence, you start to lose your curiosity, your spark, your sense of wonder. And when that happens, even the strongest bond can start to feel heavy. There's something profoundly attractive about someone who doesn't lose themselves in love. Someone who says, I adore you, but I still need my mornings alone. Or, I love spending time with you, but I also love the quiet time I have with myself. That's not rejection, that's respect. It's saying, I value you enough to want to bring my best self into this, and I can only do that if I keep nurturing who I am. And here's the beautiful part. When you honor your own space, you also give the other person permission to honor theirs. You create an environment where both of you can breathe, where both of you can grow without fear that growth will pull you apart. Because when love is healthy, independence doesn't create distance, it creates depth. There's a kind of love that feels like freedom, the kind where you both cheer each other on, where you encourage each other to go out into the world, to chase dreams, to explore, to evolve. You come back to each other not because you have to, but because you want to. That's love without fear. That's connection built on choice, not control. It takes emotional maturity to give someone space. It takes trust. It means believing that if you step back, they won't forget you, and if they do, they were never meant to stay. It's knowing that clinging doesn't create security, it creates tension. But space, when handled with trust, builds closeness. It says, I believe in what we have enough to let it breathe. I think the reason so many relationships struggle is because people confuse intensity with intimacy. They think being together all the time means being close, but closeness isn't measured by proximity. It's measured by presence. You can be wrapped around someone and still feel 1,000 miles away, and you can spend a few days apart and still feel completely connected, because real closeness is built through trust, through understanding, through respect for each other's need to simply be. Independence doesn't mean you don't need anyone. It just means you choose people from a place of wholeness instead of lack. You don't need someone to complete you. You choose them to complement you. You're not afraid of being alone because you know how to find peace in your own company. And when you live like that, love stops being about fear of loss. It becomes about appreciation. Imagine this. Two people walking side by side, not holding on to each other for balance, but moving together because it feels right. They don't cage each other. They inspire each other. They're both growing, evolving, learning, and through that, their connection deepens. That's what love looks like when both people have space to exist as individuals. When you hold on too tightly to someone, you start to squeeze the life out of what you're trying to protect. But when you trust that what's meant for you won't need to be controlled, you relax. You open up, you stop forcing love to fit your fears and start allowing it to grow in its own way. That's when you see the beauty of space. It's not a void, it's potential. The truth is, independence keeps love alive. It keeps the mystery, the curiosity, the growth. When both people keep discovering themselves, they keep discovering new parts of each other. You become two evolving souls, choosing each other again and again, not because you have to, but because you want to. And maybe that's what the real boundary of space and independence is about. Not building walls, but building respect. Respect for your own journey and for the journey of the person you love. It's understanding that you can walk beside someone without losing sight of your own path, because in the end, the love that lasts isn't the one that takes away your freedom. It's the one that reminds you how beautiful it feels to be free and still be loved. You know, when we talk about boundaries, most people think it ends at saying no, but that's only half of it. A boundary without consequence is just a wish. It's a quiet hope that someone will respect your line, even if you don't enforce it. The truth is, people don't learn from what you say. They learn from what you do when your words are tested. And every time you keep giving chances without change, you teach them that your boundaries are flexible. You teach them that your peace is negotiable. Consequences aren't punishment. They're truth in action. They're how you honor yourself when words aren't enough anymore. It's saying, I love you, but I won't let you keep hurting me. It's walking away from the table when respect isn't being served. It's choosing silence over arguing, distance over chaos, peace over proving your point. Because at some point you realize that your energy is too precious to keep spending on people who only understand loss. The hardest part about enforcing consequences is that it often feels cold. It feels like you're abandoning someone you care about. But what you're really doing is refusing to abandon yourself. You're showing them and reminding yourself that you can be kind and firm at the same time, that love without accountability isn't love, it's enablement. I once knew a woman who kept forgiving a partner who made promises but never followed through. Every time he said, I'll change, she'd believe him. Every time he disappointed her, she'd make excuses. But one day, something shifted. She didn't yell, she didn't beg, she just stopped showing up. She stopped rearranging her life for someone who couldn't keep his word, and in that quiet act, she reclaimed her power. The man didn't know how to respond because for the first time, her actions spoke louder than her forgiveness. That's what a consequence looks like. Not revenge, but release. The truth is, consequences aren't about hurting someone else. They're about teaching people what it means to be in your life. They create a structure, a standard that protects your peace. When you say, if you lie to me, I won't continue this conversation, and you mean it, you're not being dramatic. You're building emotional safety. You're showing others that trust is sacred, not optional. But it's not easy. Holding consequences requires emotional strength. And sometimes it feels lonely, because when you start honoring your boundaries, you lose the people who benefited from your lack of them. You'll be misunderstood. People will call you distant, difficult, selfish. But don't let that noise shake you. The ones who truly care about you will rise to meet your standards. The rest will fall away, and that's not loss, it's alignment. Every act of consequence is an act of self-respect. When you keep choosing yourself, you're sending a message to the world. I am not afraid to walk away from what doesn't honor me. And ironically, that's what draws the right people closer. Because people value what has value. When they know there's a cost to disrespect, they start showing up differently. There's a quiet kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing apologies and start enforcing standards. You stop begging people to see your worth. You stop explaining why you're hurt to those who don't care to understand. You just move differently. You love differently. You protect your peace like it's something sacred, because it is. At the end of the day, consequences aren't walls, they're doors. They don't shut people out. They show who's willing to walk through with respect. They separate those who take from those who give, those who play with your heart from those who hold it carefully. And that's the kind of clarity that changes everything. When you finally live with that kind of strength, when your boundaries have consequence, you stop begging to be respected. You become someone who commands it without ever needing to raise your voice. Boundaries aren't about control, they're about clarity. They say, this is how I love myself, and this is how I invite you to love me too. When you live by them, you don't have to chase value, you become it. and the right man won't run from your strength. He'll rise to meet it because real love doesn't fear your boundaries, it respects them.